It's a smashing morning in sunny Bray. I'm not sure if that's real. Um, if it is, I'm delighted for you. Lashing rain where I am. Morning, Karen. Lashing rain seems to be the phrase of the morning here. And it's sunny in Provence in France. Terrific. Morning, Cheryl. People still coming in here, so just a couple more moments and we'll start the webinar. So really appreciate everyone joining us this morning. Okay, folks. I think what we'll do is I see people are still coming in, right? But we'll start this morning's webinar. So look, really appreciate everyone taking the time out to join us this morning. I know we're all busy, and really appreciate you taking the time out to join us this morning. So look, what's interesting is when we started these webinars, we sort of said, well, look, let's ask people to talk about what the weather is like, and then that'll just let us know that people can hear us. But what's happened naturally this morning is people have joined and said good morning and actually told us what the weather is like in their wherever they are. So that's great, right? That naturally happens. So it's lashing rain where I am, but I hope everyone is doing well. We appreciate you joining us. We have a great lineup of speakers and content for you this morning. So as you know, it's about the topic of diversity and inclusion, from awareness into action and the role of leadership, right? So yes, we have great speakers, but really want the people to, get involved, submit your questions in terms of the Q&A chat, right? Any thoughts or questions you have, please send them in. We got some questions in advance as well, which I'll work through. So thank you for submitting them. And look, before I introduce the first speaker, we'll just have a few announcements, if that's all right. Just a couple of moments, if I could just take your time. So we do have a podcast called The Red Cube. That is a picture of me from the side. It's not, just in case anyone thinks it is. I don't think anyone does think it is, all right. But we have a podcast called Red Cube, right? And we yeah, we're a number of episodes in, and it's all things about people and culture. And one of our speakers today, David, is actually featured in the last podcast that went out there, right? So actually, we might actually pop a link to the podcast into the chat function there for people to see. So hope you've had a chance anyway to check out the Red Cube podcast. We're having a lot of fun putting that together. Um, Next up, then we have we're delighted to announce that Best Workplaces is extending out the brand, and we now have Best Workplaces for Health and Wellbeing. So look, we believe that this will be the premium standard in terms of health and wellbeing accolades and achievements from an employer branding point of view. So I know we have a mixture of clients and non-clients on the call. If you were a client and you've surveyed already, there's nothing new you have to do for best workplaces in health and wellbeing. We will be looking at your data, and we will specifically on the wellbeing questions, and we'll be announcing whether you've achieved that standard over the next number of weeks. And that publication date will be on the 18th of April. If you're a non-client and you're curious about Great Place to Work and how we can help you, if you want to be included for Best Workplaces Health and Wellbeing, you'll have to be surveyed and certified by the 15th of March. But nothing new for existing clients to do in terms of that Best Workplaces for Health and Wellbeing. Thank you, Akshita. And then Best Workplaces in Tech. So the publication date for that is May 2024. It still feels strange saying 2024, but here we are. Last date to get certified is the 28th of April. So that's the Best Workplaces in Tech. And then before I introduce the first speaker, I thought we might share just some of the data that we've got back related to diversity and inclusion, right? So as you all know, we have a Best Workplaces list, if you like, that we produce every year. And what we've done is we've had a look at the data that we got back on two key questions around diversity and inclusion, looking at best workplaces data and then looking at the data we have for non-certified organizations, all right? Non-Great Place to Work certified organizations. And two questions you can see on the screen here. One question we asked employees, people here are treated fairly regardless of their gender. And in a best workplace, the agreement is 94% on that question. And in a non-certified organization, it's at 78%. So you can see the difference. And then another question, people here are treated fairly regardless of their age. In a best workplace, it's 93%. And in a non-certified organization, that number is at 67%. All right. So you can see the difference in terms of, being a great culture, not being a great culture, and how that impacts in terms of diversity and inclusion. And the final thing to say, just before I introduce first speakers, is a Great Place to Work. We very much have an approach where we're looking to support organizations to build a great place to work for all, not a great place to work for some. So we want to encourage organizations to build a workplace that's where people, no matter what their age profile, no matter what their ethnicity, no matter how they look, that they're having a great experience when they come to work. That's very much our mission here. So thank you for that, Akshita. Appreciate you sharing the slides there. So I'm delighted to introduce first speakers. So from PREM Group, we have Sarah Marr, and from Lift Ireland, we have Joanne Hession. And PREM Group have, I would say, a simplified approach in terms of the work they do around diversity and inclusion. And they've also worked with Joanne's organisation in terms of Lift Ireland. And that's been really important in terms of getting that leadership buy-in and support around this important topic. So thank you everyone for joining us. Pop your questions into the Q&A. And Sarah, delighted to hand over to you.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. And it's great to see so many people on this webinar. It's obviously a topic of great interest. So I'll give you a little bit of background about our company. Akshita, we can probably move on to the next slide, because I'm not so sure if everyone will have heard of PREM Group. We were founded in Dublin in 1996. We're a hotel and hospitality management services company, and we operate in 5 countries, in Ireland, England, Scotland, Belgium, and the Netherlands. At last count, we have 683 team members. I think we have about 420 of those are based in Ireland, and the others are based in the other countries I mentioned. 25% of our colleagues in Ireland hold 5 years plus service, which in an industry where turnover is an issue, employee turnover, we're quite proud of that retention figure. Actually, there's quite a few of us who are around 20 years plus. I started in the company in 2000, and there's a good crew of us that have been around for quite a while. We're very proud that we have 41 nationalities represented on our team. This brings very, very many advantages, including last year we had this lovely Global Colleague Month where colleagues were invited to come and cook for their colleagues, cook their national cuisine, and that proved a great hit, actually. So we're delighted with the advantages that all those nationalities bring. And we've a broad age range. We've employees of 16 years of age right up to employees of 74. So in terms of gender balance, we're very balanced. It's about 50-50 throughout the group. And that's the same at senior leadership level as it is throughout the group. So that's something else that we're pleased about. Akshita, we'll start off with a poll, if that's okay with you. The guys gave me an opportunity to ask a question, and of all of you, and that this will be very beneficial to me because I've been really honest. You know, as Cathal said, we take a simple approach when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And when Cathal asked me to come on this webinar and talk about diversity and inclusion, I actually had a strong moment of imposter syndrome because I was saying, you know, do we do enough in this area to qualify? And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, well, actually, do you know what? We don't actually have a D&I strategy written down. There's a confession right there. We don't have a formal diversity inclusion strategy written down. We do have a policy, a diversity and inclusion policy, and I'm very, you know, it's a very extensive policy. It's rooted in legislation, but it's rooted in really good principles of diversity inclusion being at the heart of the company, and you know, led by senior leadership in the company. But we don't have the formal strategy written down. So I'd really be interested to see what other organizations are saying. And I'm seeing there, yeah, it's funny, there's 28% have D&I policies that form part of a formal strategy. So I suppose I'm sort of comforted by that, in that we're not on our own in not actually having a formal policy. What we do have, you can move on to the next slide if you will, Akshita. What we do have is a very strong focus on our values and our ethos. And for us, this is what drives our approach to diversity and inclusion. So like being part of the hospitality industry, it might make it actually a little bit easier for us to naturally cultivate a diverse workforce, because hospitality in essence is a very diverse industry. But for us in PREM Group, there's a deep rooted recognition that inclusivity is key to the engagement of our team members and to achieving our company goals. So diversity and inclusion and the importance of it is an absolute given. So by recognizing the importance of diversity and inclusion and figuring out how to nurture the diverse and inclusive environment, we had three clear steps to doing this. What we did is, at the very outset, is we actually had to define what our values were. You know, we actually sit down and take as diverse a group as possible across the company. And in 2018, we actually discussed what are our values and what is our company ethos. And when we were happy that we had properly defined these, and this was very authentic and real for us, we actually moved to the stage of applying these values and ethos in creating all of our policies, practices and procedures. So this sort of infusion step happens all the time. Like if we're having to go back and revisit any policies or create new policies, we have to hold them up against our values and ethos and check that it really rings true and it properly represents the values and ethos of our company. And then we have to make sure that we live our values and ethos and make them relevant in every aspect of our work. So this is how we approach diversity and inclusion. You know, defining how we should view diversity and inclusion, how we should practice it through our own values and ethos. So go on to the next slide, if you can. This is actually the product of our work. And this is a little card that came up after the exercise in 2018, which, by the way, started off as a brand brand exercise from the marketing department, not from the HR department, which actually was a super thing, because it meant that the values and the ethos that we were coming up with wasn't just driven from HR, which sometimes tends to happen. But this is what we came up with. Our values we defined as being mindful, passionate, flexible, and performance-driven. Now, these weren't exactly the words that I would have chosen. They weren't top of my list, but what I really liked was what's behind them. When we talk about being mindful, we're talking about being present and attentive and considerate in every interaction. And by being mindful, we want to create an atmosphere of respect where there's understanding, empathy, and a real feeling that, a feeling of inclusivity, I guess. And then when we're talking about being passionate, this means fostering a goal of positivity around work and trying to create a sense of shared ownership of goals and shared sense of achievement when things go well. When it comes to flexibility, we try to work with a growth mindset that is compatible with a diverse workforce, and we rise to challenges and adapt to change. And on the other side of it, when we look at our ethos in general, we have a big long phrase there, but really how we summarize that and what we captured was do the right thing. So we give this card to every employee that starts in the company. It sits up on walls around the place. These are the values and the ethos that underpin everything that we do. So when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we always refer to our values, and we always refer to what's important to our business. We might move on to the next slide if we can, please, Akshita. So I have a number of examples of how we would sort of live our D&I in the company through our values. And the first point is like fostering a growth mindset in recruitment. So this is extremely important to us, that when we look at recruitment, we don't look at it through a narrow lens, that we look very broadly at it. And in the hospitality industry, like a lot of us struggle with recruitment. There's a staff shortages all around for many businesses in hospitality. So it's very important to us to look at recruitment with a growth mindset. So we recently actually asked all of our managers who are involved in the recruitment process to attend a training and development course that actually looked at how we recruit and how open-minded we are when it comes to recruitment. And then when you move beyond the recruitment process, when people are actually working with us, what needs people have that need to be met in order for them to stay in employment. So it's very, I mean, it can be difficult when you're working in a sort of very busy environment and you see work being done in a particular way all the time. But it's like, what accommodations can we make that will benefit us as a business and help us hold on to good employees? So it moves right from the recruitment phase right through to, how we retain people and how we develop people. And engagement opportunities for everyone. We're very mindful when we run sort of HR initiatives in the group, that as much as possible, these initiatives should be open to everybody. So like I mentioned, Global Colleague Month, this is a very important opportunity for us to include everybody from whatever nationality they came from in sort of a focus on celebrating nationality. And that's just a small example. And the development opportunities for everyone, it's, we work very hard to make sure that, number one, that development opportunities are well advertised, but also that we're listening to what opportunities are needed and what people want. So we have a very focused check-in process where managers would sit down and team leaders would sit down with the people on a one-to-one basis with people and ask them, what would you like to achieve for yourself and what needs to be put in place for that to be achieved, and to think really broad-mindedly about that. And then recognition opportunities for everyone. One of our favorite awards every year is what we call PREM Ethos Award, and we recognised everybody in the company has an opportunity to vote for this, and everybody is included as somebody that could receive a PREM Ethos Award. And the Ethos Award is literally about who does the right thing. And you could be the CEO and be nominated, you could be kitchen porter nominated, but we really instill a sort of an attachment to value of the company ethos, because everybody wants to be nominated for this, and it is open to everybody to win. So it's lovely to see people achieving that and seeing on the stage the broad range of people that are receiving recognition. And then, focusing on dignity at work, we had a great opportunity recently when there was updated protocols around dignity at work issued by the HSA and the WRC, and we brought that in, and we made it an opportunity to update our policy on dignity at work, and then we trained 200 people in the company about awareness around dignity at work, and what you need to do in order to make sure that we provide an environment where people can thrive no matter who they are, and what people can realize the value that they bring to the company. So there are a few examples of small things that we've been doing, but by far one of the most compelling and impactful initiatives that we've brought into the company, and the reason why I asked Joanne to come along today is the introduction of a partnership with Lift, which is a non-profit organisation in Ireland. The timing was absolutely perfect. When we went through that process of looking at our values and ethos and defining the values and ethos, that was 2018. Around the same time, our company CEO was invited to a lunch by a friend who said, I think you'd be interested in this company Lift. They talk about values and ethos a lot, and I hear you talking about that all the time. So Jim went along to this meeting, and the next day I had a note on my desk saying, would you be interested in talking to this lady? And Joanne walked in our door about a week later, and we shall say that the rest is history. Joanne, you might talk us through Lift perhaps, and I'll join back and talk about the impact on our company.
Yeah, thanks a million, Sarah, and thank you so much for inviting me to share this stage with you as part of this really important webinar. Hello to everybody. So look, in one sentence, what are LIFT all about? If you want to live good values in your organization, LIFT is a tool that you can use to help you and your colleagues do that, all of your colleagues, not just a certain number, not just absolutely everybody, whether you're the CEO, a new person in the door, security guard, doesn't matter. Every single person can do LIFT. So I'll just take a couple of minutes and I'll tell you briefly about LIFT and why do we exist, how you can use it, and who else in the country together with PREM is also using LIFT. Great to see that we've got so many here today that aren't yet aware of it. So delighted to get the opportunity to tell you a little bit about it. So moving on to my first slide, LIFT, we're a non-profit organization. I think that's certainly an important part for me. Set up as a social enterprise, we're not for profit, really so that we can make sure that everybody can access it. That's why we're done like this. We're not a training company trying to sell training or charging really hard. Our fees are definitely accessible for absolutely everybody, and we make sure that we work that out. But our vision is to create positive change in Ireland, and we do that by developing leaders of character. Now, when I say leaders of character, what I'm talking about is really building us bigger on the inside than we are on the outside. And we do that one person at a time. Now, that sounds like it takes a long time. It actually doesn't. And I'll show you exactly how that works. But when I talk about leadership and developing leaders of character, it's important that I make the distinction that I'm not just talking about people with positions or titles. We're actually all leaders. Every single one of us is a leader. And what do I mean about that? Well, if you've got people around you, whether they're colleagues or friends or teenagers at your kitchen table, who pay attention to what you're saying, then even if they're not paying attention to you all the time, when they are paying attention to you, you're leading them. It's a verb, it's an action thing. You're leading them then, and sometimes you're leading them very well, or sometimes I'm leading them very well, and sometimes I'm leading people not so well. But that's the case whether you're leading as a CEO or you have a position or a title, or whether you are a 16-year-old in school, chatting with your friends. If they're paying attention to you, then you're leading them. So we're all leading all of the time, and we don't tend to think of leadership like that. And what we're about at LIFT is helping us to build our inner muscle so that we have more positive influence with the people around us. So our vision is to create positive change. We're on a 10-year goal to get 10% of the population of the country, 500,000 people living LIFT, and that will create a ripple effect of social change, which is really what we're looking for. And we're thrilled to be partnered with PREM. Sarah and them all in there are just fantastic at living this. So why did we actually start? And Sarah asked me just to mention to you why are we doing this? Is Ireland not okay? And I'm an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 27, and my second one shortly after that. And I left those to set up LIFT. I'd been invited to do a lot of leadership work within corporates and to look at trust and how people build trust. And I was doing a lot of work in this area. And a lot of the time, the question I'd be asked by top teams are, what do we do about culture? How do we make our culture even better? And really, how each of us as individuals, we all know this, how each of us as individuals behave and act, that's what collectively makes up our culture. So I started to look into that a little bit more. And as I talk to people, people will give us two responses. They'd either say, sure, we're not that bad in Ireland. Do we really need to behave and act any better? That'd be one response. And the second one would be, sure, what can we do about it anyway? And in response to the first question, and really I suppose the impetus for me to get this started in the very first place was, we are this great country and we have fantastic people here, but sometimes our intentions are really good, but our actions don't always marry up to that. And we don't always live up to that. And, all we have to do is look across the papers, or, we can see areas of poor behavior across every single industry sector, whether it's sport or any sector that's there, public sector, private sector, not-for-profit sector, and so on. So we don't have to look very hard. And also, I can put up my hand and I can say, do you know what? I could actually I could actually behave and act better. It's not that I intend to behave and act poorly, but sometimes it's really busy. And so I might not always listen fully to a colleague that I need to, or I might cut across someone without meaning to, and so on. So it's very easy to have creases in our behaviors and actions. So we decided to do something about it. So what we did was we decided to launch Lift in 2018. And actually, if we can move on to the next slide, we went out and we asked Ireland if we're to behave and act, as better leaders, whether it's in our companies or in our boardrooms, or whether it's in our sports clubs or our kitchen tables. What do we actually need to work on? What do we need to get better at? And the research came back and said, well, actually, in Ireland, we need more listening, and we need more positive attitude, more competence, more honesty and integrity, more dedication, more respect. And really, when we think about it, wouldn't it be, imagine if we had a whole country where every single person here not only felt or knew that they were respected, knew it in sort of, but actually felt respected. That's a different thing. Ireland asked for more empathy and more accountability, holding ourselves accountable, but also holding other people accountable. So I'd been doing some work in Paraguay on leadership. I saw a behavior change model there that I got permission to use here in this country, and I built Lift around that as a character sort of building tool in order for us all to get a little bit better at these areas. Now, since then, actually, if you move on to the next, we've had demands from lots of our organizations that are partnered with us to say, actually, these are behaviors that we want to see, and these are traits and so on that we'd love to see in our organization. And how do we see more of that? And so we've now integrated all of these different areas into the Lift process that are used by different organizations, tailored for our partner organizations. So, and that's the way that that Lift happens. So what is it exactly, and how can you use it? On the next slide there, I think I have we got it? Yeah, okay, so we use round tables. Okay, so there isn't a physical table, but it's just five or six people, 4, 5 or 6 people together. They meet once a week in a small group for about 30 to 45 minutes. You can do it online or you can do it in person. So you can just hop onto a round table, 30 or 45 minutes, you're finished, that's it, and you're off again. It's like going to a really quick gym, but for your character muscle. It allows self-reflection on key leadership themes and values. So those first 8 that Ireland called for are the first 8 that everybody does, allowing you to stop and self-reflect on how do I actually, listening, okay, I'm a pretty good listener, but actually what the roundtable does is it helps you to delve into it a little bit more and find, have you got any creases, and take one small tiny action step to get a little bit better. And each roundtable is led by a trained Lift facilitator. They're trained by ourselves. You don't have to do anything at all. We'll train them. It just takes half a day. And it's like them being a host of a book club is probably a way of saying it. They don't have they don't have any studying to do, nothing. In the training, we show them exactly what to do. We give them a script. They follow 5 steps, and it's really very straightforward. I mean, our youngest facilitators are only 11 and 12, and our oldest is 85. So, anybody can actually do it. On the next slide, then you can see that how it sort of multiplies out. It's incredibly simple, but very effective. And in PREM, we started off by training just a few facilitators. So if the facilitators are the light blue ones there, then each facilitator takes the Lift process to 4 or 5 other people. So 5 people multiplies it out so that there are 25, including themselves. If you've 25 facilitators, which are just trained in a half day, you could have 50 trained in a half day. 25 multiplies out immediately to another 100 people. So it multiplies out very, very quickly. And then these small groups meet 30 to 45 minutes once a week. We give them all the materials, everything that they need, and they take small actions in the round tables. That's what starts to create the behavior change, because that's what we're really interested in. So PREM Group have got, and Sarah, you probably come in on this in after my next slide or so, but you've got a huge number,
We've-
137 or something facilitators.
Yeah, we do, and we've had completed more than 500 roundtables.
Yeah. So, and you've done them in all kinds of different scenarios, depending on what's important to you at the time, to
Exactly.
really bring out behaviors and traits and values that are important to you guys. I'll finish off by just telling you, look, where we are today, and then I'll hand back to Sarah. But there are about 70,000 people now have done a cycle of lift round tables. Over 450 private, public sector charities, schools, universities are all partnered to do it. Look, we welcome anybody. If we will work with everybody is welcome to lift. We're as inclusive as we can be, and we're lifting one person at a time. On the next slide, then, these are some of the partners that we're currently partnered with, everything from PREM, who are with us right since the beginning, and the ESB and PTSB and others, to the Burn Smokehouse in Lisdoonvarna and Wedding Dates down in Cork. So all sizes of organisations, all kinds of organisations. And on the next slide, you'll see that we extend lift out to not-for-profits, charities like Goal, Laura Lynn, Purple House Cancer Treatment Centre. So they all can access it free or for a very small amount, whatever they can do, because of our social enterprise model. So we ask the corporates to pay, and then whatever they can, and then we give it to everybody else for free. And in fact, Akshita, if you press the next button there, we've got about 315 schools with thousands of students that are all accessing lift as well. So our teenagers are building their character now. You know, that's so that the teenagers build it, so by the time they get to your organizations, they'll already have thinking about this. When they do it again in your organizations, we'll build a nation of leaders of stronger character. And on the next slide then, Akshita, this is some of our impact. If you'd like to know more about our impact, there's information on our website, but we have someone full-time looking at impact all of the time, because there's no point in us doing this without us actually getting behavior change. And on the next slide then, Sarah and I would love to invite you, if anybody would like to try one as a taster, take a photo of that QR code there, and you can just give us your details. And depending on whether 4 of you or 20 of you or however many turn up, we'll set up some days and times over the next few weeks, and we'll send them out to you for you to choose to come on a taster round table with us. So, you know, if you're interested, like PREM Group, you have one value in PREM that is so important to you, which is doing the right thing. I hear it all the time, and I love the way that you do it. All we are is a tool to help you do that. Sarah, you use it in many, many ways. And I have to say, I've been really inspired by what you've done during COVID. You were the first person that contacted me at 6:30 a.m. After the Taoiseach speech to say, we need lift online now. So you've done incredible things. Well done.
It's the way it ties into diversity and inclusion, being honest. There's a couple of, particularly respect and listening, those two themes. I cannot overemphasize the impact that it has on our organization, and establishing a common language around, you know, what is expected of us, and how we can bring our best in terms of diversity and inclusion. So thanks, Joanne, for all of your help. I could never have explained that, so I really appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Great. Carl, we've taken up a lot of the time now.
That's no problem, Sarah, Joanne. Thanks very much, right? Really appreciate it. There was some questions that came in, right? I've made a note of the questions, right? And if you're okay to hang on to the end, we'll try and get through them at the end, all right? But appreciate your insights there and your sharing as well. So next up, delighted to be joined by David Nally from Woodie's. David, we're going to have a conversation on this wet morning, right? And a sort of a bit of Q&A, all right? And I've made a note of some of the questions that have come in as well there. So, David, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Colin. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
David, I know you had a long commute, right? But you made it. You're here now, right? Okay, and we appreciate that. So, David, I suppose, look, a place to start, right, is just and we popped the link to the podcast that we did around this topic. It's in the chat there for everyone. But maybe a place to start, David, is kind of diversity and inclusion from a Woodie's point of view. You know, why is it important to look at?
I think from our perspective, on a very basic level, it's important to look at because it's the right thing to do. You talked about a great workplace for all, and you can't have a great workplace for all unless you're diverse and inclusive. I suppose specific to us as a retailer, retail is a fast-moving industry. We need to be able to react and to pivot to changing customer needs, external shocks to the economy, the seasonal nature of our business. And the best way to do that is to have a workforce that's attuned to the needs of the variety of demographics that make up our customer base. And then to those external challenges, to have diversity of thought and insights into how we address business challenges. And then equally, it's as important as the customer base evolves and changes, that our customers see and interact with people and that they can relate to and that mirror the population in general.
Brilliant, David. And one of the questions we got in advance actually was from Nicola and KDYS, right? And the question was related to kind of how do you begin? Like, what's the start of the journey look like? So you might share how that looked for yourself, David.
Yeah, I'll share our look for ourselves. I suppose there is no template for this. So when we started to look at it, there's no A to Z of diversity and inclusion because every business is different. Every business has different challenges, is in a different environment, is at a different stage of the journey. So we started and stopped and went back to the start a little bit back in 2018. But I guess in terms of the journey, we started with the business case on why we wanted to do this, how we engaged with the business. Getting the senior leadership team buy-in from the very start was critical for us. We felt you would be on an uphill journey if you didn't have the leadership team on board and the senior management team on board. And then we had to go through a journey of understanding what it was that we wanted to achieve. So to do that, we looked at where we were. We looked at the demographics of the workforce. We looked at how the culture was. We looked at our engagement survey. We looked at our people data and baselined where we were. And then we had to figure out where we wanted to get to. And initially we started with targets and looking at quotas and that type of thing. And then we actually brought it back to, we want to be representative of modern Ireland, which is an ambitious goal in itself, but far less ambitious than we initially started with. And then we looked at data, we looked at where we needed to really hone our focus. And then we started it took us probably about a year to get to a place where we had a plan on a page that we could call a strategy. And that strategy was understanding where we're at, getting the buy-in from the business, educating leaders and colleagues across the business about why we're doing this, being quite open about where we were and where we wanted to get to, and doing training. We had to refine our storytelling. So in the early days, we were talking about things like unconscious bias, and I know I mentioned it to you last day, Cottle. But we learned very quickly when you're standing in front of a room of 200-300 people, or you're sending in communication out to 12 or 13 or 1400 people, and you're saying we need to get better at unconscious bias, what you're essentially saying is we think you're biased and we're going to train it out of you, or we're going to try and train it out of you. And that puts people in a defensive mode because you are suggesting there's something fundamentally wrong. When we shifted the narrative to, we want to talk about conscious inclusion, what we were saying was we wanted everybody to be involved in this. We don't want to other people. So our storytelling had to be refined over the years. And then we had to look at how do we do this meaningfully and authentically. So rather than just being a business that says we want to be known for diversity and inclusion, let's be a business that's diverse and inclusive and has the policies, the procedures, the benefits, the structures in place to achieve that. And then I suppose the biggest fundamental change to D&I at Woodie's is that we took a step back in 2020 and we completely ripped our recruitment approach apart. So we went from being a business where we had recruitment was essentially devolved to hiring managers, very light touch from a HR perspective, other than posting job adverts and handing CVs over to hiring managers. and to then centralizing that into the HR function, restructuring the HR team, introducing technology like AI recruitment technology, to level the playing field for candidates. So that was probably the biggest thing that we did, but that was a couple of years into a journey where we looked at data, we understood where we were, we understood where we wanted to get to, we understood how to tell that story, how to get the buy-in from the business. And then we started to make really radical changes like the recruitment approach.
David, thanks. I mean, that lays it out right in terms of the approach, right? And you know, a year before we get that strategy down on paper, right? But we have to be, we've got to take our time, and we've got to be accurate in terms of what we do. Nicola, I hope that helps in terms of the question you asked. I know Emma from the Montenotte in Cork was really curious about language, right? And I think you touched on it there, David, in terms of the importance of the language we use when we look at this important topic. And I'm sure there was a few, David, but any challenges along the way, or what are the main challenges that you came up against as you kind of rolled out this approach?
Yeah, there's lots. And I suppose the thing is, we speak to businesses, and I speak to businesses that are looking, going, we want to be where you are today. I'm looking at other businesses going, I want us to be where you are today. So I don't think this is a journey that, you know, any business I've engaged with is fully done and dusted on. And I think the interesting thing is, as you go further along, it tends to pop up new challenges or new issues that you have to consider and deal with. But I suppose if I look at our journey that we've been on, the very start was including everyone, not othering people. So when you start to talk about diversity, people like me, white males, think, well, diversity isn't about me, and you don't naturally include yourself in that conversation. So that was the first thing we had to do to make sure it was about everybody and everybody was included in the journey. As I say, we evolved our language, our storytelling, we were, you know, we're very conscious about making sure that this was something everybody's on board with, and it felt natural and it felt authentic. And change management, and particularly around the recruitment approach, we flipped our recruitment model pretty much overnight, and we went from, you know, having 20 odd years of hiring managers being heavily involved in the recruitment process, absolutely owning start to finish who they hired into their teams, to a model where actually they didn't engage with the candidate until we had job offered within the HR function. So all first round interviews for store colleague roles are completed by the AI tool Sapia. So it's effectively an AI recruitment tool, which is then administered by the recruiters within the HR team. So for the first kind of 6 months of that process, we saw the results pretty much instantaneously. Within the 3 months, we were hiring, within the first 3 months of that approach, we were hiring twice as many colleagues from an ethnic minority than we had been in the previous 3 years, and 1.5 times the amount of females. So we were looking at it going, this is working. This is changing the demographics of our workforce. But there was a lot of resistance. You know, every time a candidate didn't work out, our local managers were vocal about the candidates and why they didn't work out and why they could hire better than the HR team. And we had to listen and engage and take that feedback on board. And then we had to tweak the process slightly. So we went from managers owning it start to finish to HR owning it start to finish. And then we decided there's a hybrid model here. So we'll have the structures, we'll make the candidate experience right, we'll be able to measure it, we'll be able to make sure we're getting the right types of people. But actually at the final checkpoint, we'll bring the hiring manager, the team manager into the loop, so they feel somewhat involved and invested in the process as well. So that's probably the biggest watch out that we've had over the years. It's the change management approach, and how you tell that. I stood in front of meetings and said to managers, great news, we're taking recruitment off you, we're freeing up 35,000 hours of resource that you have back to lead your teams, but all they heard was, you're taking the control that I have to recruit into my team off me. So you do have to be mindful of that as you go through this.
Thanks, David. Well, you touched on leadership buy-in there, and Grace from Citgo is very much interested in any specifics, David, around how you got that leadership buy-in, like any specific things you did.
Yeah, we started off trying to be quite complex, as I say, starting to look at quotas, looking into very granular detail. And then as we had a couple of meetings with the leadership team, we stripped it back to this is the right thing to do from a human perspective. So we all deserve to be able to come to work and to be ourselves and to do that without fear of recrimination. And it's generally accepted that's when you give your best in work. But it was regular engagement with the leadership team, sharing the data that we were looking at, and then looking at census data. So that was probably the moment it shifted where we were able to say this is the population and this is the demographics of our workforce. And then we landed on let's just be representative of the population. And that's quite an easy thing to get people behind because it feels like the right thing to do. We had to step through it. We had to be mindful. So before we got to the point where we were restructuring a function, investing in new and emerging technology, we stepped through all the easy wins, the low-hanging fruit, the introduction of policies, procedures. Then we ramped it up to investing in training. And then we eventually got it to a point where we went, now, if we want to step, have a gear change on this, this is the next thing that we need to do. But it was all very phased, and lots of conversations and lots of taking feedback on board, and listening to genuine concerns and addressing them as well throughout it.
Brilliant. And I just love the phrasing around storytelling as well. I think it's one of the most underutilized tools that we have when it comes to culture and things like that. A question in from Karen just around what was the name of the AI recruitment tool that you used again, David?
It's called Sapia. So there's a couple of tools that we use within the recruitment approach. So the first thing that we did was we rewrote all of our job adverts to identify unconsciously biased language and to strip that out of the job adverts. And we used a tool called Textio to do that. So it's an augmented writing tool. And then once we had the job adverts and the employer brand updated, then we invested in the AI tool. It's called Sapia. And the contact that we have there is matt@sapia.ai. So you can email Matt on that and he's happy to engage with anyone.
Brilliant, David. Thanks for that. I suppose, look, just before we kind of move on to there's lots of questions coming in, right, which is great. So you really outlined kind of the journey you've been on, the work that you've done. What's next? Is it following the same path? Like what's next for Woodies in terms of your approach?
There's still opportunities that we have, and equally there's things that we need to revisit now. So if I look at where we're at today, in the last 3 months, we've started to focus back in on gender balance. So we spent a good period of time where we were 50-50 gender balance across the company and throughout our operating structure. And then we start to focus on other areas. And there's been a small change in gender balance. Now, it's not a drastic change, it's a 1% change. But we're looking on that 1% can't become 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So we had to stop and go, right, we just need to make sure that as we continue to move forward now and work through other characteristics, that we're keeping the plate spinning. So there is a bit of a plate spinning happening at the moment. The next opportunity for us is around disability representation within the workforce. And that's something that I'm passionate about, and I'm also thankful that we don't seem to be the only business currently experiencing that. So we're not unique in that space. We've made strides. So we're representative of the general population pretty much on gender, on ethnicity, on sexual orientation, on age. However, disability representation, we're halfway there, I would have said. What we found as a real challenge is finding the right partnership model. So we've, over the years, we've engaged with organizations, we've thought that we've had the right partnership model, and then we found that actually the layers sitting behind that organization are quite dispersed. They're not working together. They're overwhelming us, and that's caused the challenge. I think we're very close to agreeing the right model with an organization. And then we've said, let's step this up. So we want incremental gains. So You want to see a 2% increase in colleagues with a disability this year, build on that again next year till we get to that 13%.
Thanks, David. Just a comment in from Elaine there, and I'd echo Elaine's comment, right? As a customer of Woodie's, it's clear to see this strong diversity approach in action in the stores, enhances the Woodie's brand and makes it more attractive to customers. So great job by Woodie. So thanks, Elaine, and I would echo what Elaine said there. Just we'll bring everyone in on the conversation now. But Mary, just you mentioned disability there, David. Mary is talking about sort of AI or the AI software that's enabled the recruitment process around ethnicity and gender. A question was, how does it allow for applicants with disabilities?
So it's one of those things that's not one size fits all. So when you look at disabilities, obviously there's various strands of that. So for applicants that have a neurodiverse disability, we see feedback. So pretty much every candidate gives us anonymous feedback on the process. And for people who have, as I say, neurodiverse disability, they get the ability to do an interview at their own time and pace in a Facebook Messenger style chat that gives them a lot of comfort around thinking about the answers. They're not face to face with one or two interview panels grilling them in a tense situation. So it works in that aspect. There are other areas that it doesn't work in, and that's why we need to find that right partnership model in terms of working with an organization that can help us source candidates, can help us screen them in the right way, and can help us support them in coming into our workforce in the right way. And so it doesn't tick all boxes, but it ticks a lot of the boxes for us.
Thanks, David. For Joanne, there's an interest around you talked about competence, and you had competence up on the screen, and just would you mind expanding on what you mean by competence and your approach?
Yeah, so competence was one of the areas that Ireland, when we did research, Ireland said we need more competence in the country. We need people to be more competent. And really what competence is being good at what you do and always looking to improve all the time. So when you do a competence round table as part of the LIFT cycle, you're stopping and you're taking through a piece on competence, telling you what are the benefits of being competent, the characteristics, the steps to follow, etc., to become more competent, but also given the opportunity to stop and think about the last 24 to 48 hours. So you roll back the videotape on everything, every interaction that you've had, and sort of looking at yourself to see, oh, actually, was I really thinking in a sort of improvement mindset around that, and looking for creases? And then you come out of the roundtable with one small tiny action step to become more competent. And it's that one small tiny action step and that chance that you get to reflect on your behavior and actions that stops you sort of scooting through life thinking you're really competent about things without really stopping and reflecting. And that's what enables you to get a little bit better.
Thanks, Joanne. The phrase "sure it'll be grand" comes to right. Sarah, Jill is curious around. Did you define what diversity is for PREM Group from a workplace point of view? And then I think I know the answer to this, but you might give your thoughts on it. Like what parts of society should we be including when we think about it?
Yeah. Well, for us, like, defining diversity is really how we view it. I think, for us, we very much respect that everybody is different and everybody is unique. And we all have different needs that need to be met in order to succeed. And I think key to it really is some of those needs are visible, and but some of the needs aren't visible. So really what's important for us is good communication, and this is where we tie in with LIFT. So the first theme that you'll always do at LIFT is listening. And for us, so when we have our check-in processes that I mentioned, it's very important we train our people managers in actually sitting down and listening to people's needs. So what are the circumstances that are going on in their lives? And, what are the things that might be that we need to support them in order for them to further themselves? And that's how I believe that you maintain a diverse workforce, if you actually look at people as unique and valuable in their individuality and what they can bring to the organization. That was that part of that you want to know.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks for that. David, Carl is I know you talked about systems as well, systematically. So Carla's curious around kind of how do you know when the organisation is enabling D&I systematically, apart from the surveys or anything, any other checks you have?
I suppose the survey is the biggest thing that we can look at. So when we tweaked our Great Place to Work survey and added on different demographics a few years back, that gave us comfort that as we're becoming more diverse, we're becoming more inclusive. So we've seen our inclusivity scores continue to grow. I suppose there's a feeling. I know that sounds a bit wishy-washy, but there is a feeling. It's visible as well. I go to meetings and I look and go, I used to sit in those meetings and they were very homogenous. There was a time when we used to make a joke, and I used to openly joke that I was the only gay in the village here. And now 12% of our workforce are LGBTQI plus. You look in meetings and you see 50-50 gender representation. It's visible, it's evident. And then I suppose the other measurement, and I was only thinking about it recently, is we've yet to see in the change in our business, the change in our workforce, how much more diverse we've become. We've not yet seen a discrimination case raised either informally or formally. So that tells me that it's actually in practice and that it's in action, because that was a concern initially back in 2018, 2019. We thought, are we going to start to see tensions within the workforce, different backgrounds, insensitivities that will cause issues? We've not seen a single case of that in my time here. And I've been here as long as we've been focused on D&I.
Thanks, David. Question from Laura from Sculpted by Amy. Sculpted by Amy, you're recently certified as a great place to work, so congratulations, Laura. Interested in kind of D&I from a startup point of view, right? Are the principles the same? Sarah and Joanne, you might give your thoughts on this. Are the principles the same when you think about a D&I approach?
Yeah. Well, if you're talking about a startup, you're in a perfect position to actually establish your values and ethos from the outset. So, this is a great time to start looking at that. So I think it's harder for organizations that are long established, and, when they look at D&I, they might not have sort of clearly defined their values and ethos underneath that. And I think that's essential. So yeah, for a startup, I think for me, it would be starting with your values and ethos and building your policies and your strategy upon that.
Thanks, Sarah. Joanne?
Yeah, and just adding on to what Sarah's saying, it's absolutely, thinking about your values and your ethos. And as you get larger and larger, as you guys in Sculpted by Amy are, it's about how are you making sure that you keep at the fore that these are the behaviors and attitudes, the behaviors and actions that are really important to us, and they don't get diluted, or they don't just become posters on walls or mouse mats, that they actually keep on being lived all of the time. And think about how you're doing that in the same way as an organization like PREM and David and Woodie's have done.
Thanks, Joanne. We've time for one more question, David. There's a question in around so any practical tips or insights when you face that sort of defensiveness, maybe at the start of the program, during the program? You talked a bit about some of the recruitment piece and taking that off leaders. Any practical tips on how to deal with that defensiveness that a company might face into when they roll out this program?
Yeah, you have to be open. You have to be not defensive yourself. There would have been times and days where I was defensive. I thought I had this great recruitment strategy locked in, done, dusted. And then you start to get feedback that maybe you don't necessarily agree with on the face of it. But actually, I learned my response initially was to point back to data and to keep pointing back to data and saying, well, this is where we were, this is where we're at, this is the efficiency savings. And I did that 2 or 3 times and went, they don't want to hear it. So I need to sit, stop talking and listen. And I did a good bit of that for a couple of weeks. And then I went, okay, the crux of this is you want to be more involved. And I get it. We've gone too far on this. We've overshot the mark on this. So let's involve you. And then we kind of tried different approaches with different managers, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. And where they didn't work, we had to go back and say, look, you validated some of our concerns. And so now how do we kind of shift this back to that we meet a happy middle ground? But it's about trying to find the win-win situation. It's about educating people and taking emotion out of it as much as you possibly can.
David, thanks for that. We're at time, right? We could have gone for longer, went for a couple of more hours, all right? I want to thank David, Joanne, Sarah. Really appreciate your time in advance of the webinar, your time this morning. You've shared some great insights there, right, into the community. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Big thank you to the Great Place to Work team. Akshita did an amazing job again, right, in terms of support pre-webinar and during the webinar. Look, I hope everyone gets to stay dry on this very wet morning. Thanks a lot for joining us, folks. All right.
Thank you, Carl.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.